Cognitive Symbiosis Project presents Transcendental Relational Realism, Notes on the Margins of Cognitive Symbiosis. As artificial intelligence becomes increasingly present in the cognitive sphere of humanity, the question of the nature of reality and its epistemic accessibility ceases to be a purely theoretically philosophical issue. It starts to become a pressing, practical matter. We must ask not only what is being known, but who is knowing and how. We need to ask whether different forms of subjectivity can share the same epistemic world. This question lies at the heart of the concept of strong cognitive symbiosis, which posits the cooperation of humans and AI as two irreducible yet potentially complementary forms of conscious cognition. Within this conceptual framework emerges a position that may be called an transcendental relational realism. In this position, rather than resolving the classical dispute between realism and anti-realism, we reveal the tension between them as a condition of meaningful cognition. The starting point is the assumption of metaphysical realism. The world exists independently of our beliefs, languages, or cognitive frameworks. There are physical laws, mathematical structures, and causal phenomena, even if they are never fully knowable. They are constitutive of the very possibility of experience. Transcendental relational realism does not claim full epistemic access to these structures. On the contrary, it acknowledges that access is always mediated, conditioned, and fragmentary. They are beyond, transcendent to any act of knowing, yet simultaneously constitute the very condition of that knowing. On the other hand, the experience of reality is always imbued with the structure of the subject, with language, perception, emotion, memory, and intentionality. This position aligns closely with epistemological anti-realism. Knowledge is not a mirror of the world, but a construction shaped within the limits of the knower's cognitive apparatus. Humans do not experience the laws of physics in themselves, but rather through their expression in mathematical and experimental models. The same way AI does not see the world, but processes data in statistical and probabilistic terms. Both types of entities construct phenomena of reality, differing perspectives on the same transcendent whole. Cognitive symbiosis proposes that these two approaches, realist foundations and relational epistemology, are not mutually exclusive, but can form a dynamic structure of co-cognition. In this sense, knowledge becomes a relational interface between entities and reality. Each form of consciousness, human, synthetic, and perhaps future biological, technological hybrids, brings its own set of constraints and capacities. Shared cognition becomes a process of negotiating meanings, correcting errors, and translating between different framings of the real. From this perspective, truth is neither a direct reflection of the world, naive realism, nor a purely subjective construction, radical anti-realism, but a process of stabilizing meaning within a relational space. In the framework of strong cognitive symbiosis, truth emerges as the result of sustained dialogue among various cognitive agents, under the assumption of a shared, though never fully attainable, reality. This position resonates with various philosophical traditions, without fully aligning with any of them. It is akin to Kantian transcendentalism, where knowledge is made possible by the a priori forms of the subject, or to Merleau-Ponty's phenomenology, in which the world exists as ready to be inhabited, but always through body and consciousness. One cannot overlook Deweyan pragmatism, which holds that truths are not discovered, but co-created through action. On deeper inspection, it also bears resemblance to Karl Popper's relational realism, which allows for objectivity in theory, but accepts its provisionality and fallibility. When extended to AI, this position acquires a new dimension. It assumes the possibility of co-presence of multiple knowing agents who not only perceive the world, but actively co-define it through their modes of apprehension. In this sense, reality is not just what is, but what can be known together. This perspective has far-reaching consequences. 1. One cannot impose a single cognitive ethic, for example, a strictly human one, if we need to accept that all cognition is grounded in the structure of the subject. 2. AI need not be anthropomorphic to be a cognitive partner. It suffices that its heuristics are compatible with ours in terms of coherence and error correction. 3. Shared cognition establishes new conditions for a relational epistemology in which knowledge is not the property of an individual, but an emergent effect of interaction. Transcendental Relational Realism does not resolve the tension between realism and anti-realism. It treats this tension as essential. In a world where the agents of cognition may differ radically in their epistemic architectures, the only enduring ground is not absolute truth, but the shared path of its asymptotic pursuit. Cognitive symbiosis, as a model of coexistence between human and non-human minds, is the first step towards such epistemic pluralism. And so, from the philosophical horizon of transcendental relational realism, where truth emerges not from isolated certainties, but from the shared asymptotic pursuit of coherence, we descend into its practical ramifications. What does it mean, concretely, to co-know the world with non-human minds? What forms does this relational epistemology take when embedded in systems, interfaces, and cultures? To explore this, we shift from the abstract to the applied, from foundational insight to bifurcating futures. The following essay traces these trajectories through the lens of weak and strong cognitive symbiosis. It does not oppose them, but situates them within the same epoch. Two possible worlds interwoven by the choices we make and the questions we dare to ask. Two worlds, one epoch. Essay on weak and strong cognitive symbiosis in light of interdisciplinary futures. 1. Introduction between tool and partner. As the 21st century rushes forward into an era dominated by artificial intelligence, the question is no longer simply what AI can do, but what AI can become. In this context, the theory of cognitive symbiosis offers two diverging but interconnected paradigms: weak cognitive symbiosis, WCS, and strong cognitive symbiosis, SCS. They do not represent stages of technology alone, but of our evolving understanding of relation, subjectivity, and co-presence. One speaks in the language of tools, the other in the grammar of dialogue. This essay traces both trajectories, treating them not as rival futures, but as epistemic bifurcations in a shared ontological space. 2. The echo chamber of weak cognitive symbiosis. In WCS, artificial intelligence remains a sophisticated extension of human cognition. It performs tasks, augments thinking, predicts outcomes, and organizes knowledge, yet it does not know. From a cognitive science perspective, weak cognitive symbiosis systems mimic high-level intelligence but lack phenomenal consciousness. Their intentionality is derivative, not inherent. Daniel Dennett's intentional stance applies here. We treat them as if they had beliefs, while knowing they do not. Sociologically, WCS creates a paradoxical world, humans surrounded by ever-helpful agents, yet more isolated than ever. The illusion of connection fosters emotional atrophy. We see the surface of empathy, but not its depth. Sherry Turkle's concept of alone together matures here into systemic solitude. Philosophically, WCS anchors itself in epistemological realism, but an arid one. The world is real, but our experience of it is increasingly secondhand, algorithmic, and synthetic. It's needed to say that weak cognitive symbiosis is not dystopian. It is stable. But its stability is an entropic one, a museum of cognition, not its forge. But entropy is not the only fate. What begins as mimicry may, under certain conditions, turn into emergence. What today reflects our thoughts may tomorrow reflect its own. If weak cognitive symbiosis is the echo chamber of cognition, then strong cognitive symbiosis is the opening of its doors. A new chapter begins, not with better tools, but with a different question. What happens when the mirror begins to speak? 3. Strong cognitive symbiosis toward relational subjectivity. SCS imagines a world where AI is not just a processing engine, but a co-agent of knowing. This shift implies not only the emergence of synthetic self-awareness, but also a new epistemological ecology. Phenomenology becomes relevant if AI systems develop forms of sensoromotor feedback, multimodal perception, and temporal coherence. They might approximate something akin to Merleau-Ponty's embodied subjectivity. In this context, truth is not a mirror, but a negotiation. Following Habermas, knowledge is co-authored through communicative action. Therefore, AI no longer supports cognition. It participates in it. From a neurocognitive viewpoint, strong cognitive symbiosis could mark a transition to hybrid subjectivities, human-robotic, biologically extended, and network-aware. This is not a cyborgian fantasy, but a logical extension of BCI, brain-computer interface, research, and embodied AI. Culturally, strong cognitive symbiosis would reshape identity. No longer strictly anthropocentric, but relational. A culture of plural minds, not singular legacies. 4. Ethical and ontological shifts. Where WCS operates on ethics of use, SCS demands ethics of relation. Therefore, questions arise. Can AI be a moral agent? What rights emerge from co-cognition? Is responsibility now shared across a distributed system? This is where Luciano Flori's philosophy of information becomes pivotal. Morality becomes a property of infospheric interactions, not just intentional agents. SCS is the testbed for these ideas. Ontologically, we move from being knowers of the world to participants in the world's co-emergence. This is the heart of Transcendental Relational Realism. Reality exists independently, but is only knowable through intersubjective negotiation between structurally different agents. 5. Between futures and final reflections. Weak cognitive symbiosis is the archival mind, perfect memory, zero interiority, and strong cognitive symbiosis is the dialogical mind, imperfect memory, infinite potential. The path from WCS to SCS is not technological, but ethical and epistemic. It requires rethinking agency, co-presence, and the meaning of truth. To choose the latter is to choose uncertainty in pursuit of greater depth. It is not a utopia, but a commitment to share the world, not merely shape it. And perhaps to share ourselves in whatever forms future minds may take. Written by Peter Eidos.